Good Sunday evening, America. Welcome to Water Break. Why do conservatives lose city after city? And even when we think we are winning, we still end up losing somehow, some way. As we recover what it means to be conservative, these are important questions we really need to resolve. Our guest today, Eric Kahn, and the Water Break team is lined up and ready to deliver. So grab your best scotch or Dr. Pepper and enjoy the show. First, this episode is brought to you by New St. Andrews College. Today's culture shifts like sand, but New St. Andrews College is established on Christ, the immovable rock. It is a premier institution that forges evangelical leaders who don't fear or hate the world. Guided by God's word, they take the world back because they are equipped with the genius of classical liberal arts and God-honoring wisdom, thanks to a faculty dedicated to academic rigor and to God's kingdom. Find out more at nsa.edu. Cannonball or belly flop? You decide, or maybe not. Like me, I'm sure you've watched in awe for decades as conservative politicians get elected in office as a conservative and then govern and legislate like some squishy moderate conservative to even some sort of, moderate Democrat. It's a spectrum, like Facebook's gender policies. Currently, there are 4 Republican governors who say they will not end abortion in their state. 4. Governor Asa Hutchins of Arkansas, Governor Larry Hogan of Maryland, Governor Charlie Baker of Massachusetts, Governor Chris Sununu of New Hampshire. 4 Republican governors. It amazes me. It's truly amazing that now the paper-thin roadblock of Roe v. Wade is gone, and Republican governors are refusing to end Roe in their states. But what is even more amazing is that why hasn't the GOP kicked them out of the party? What does it mean to be a Republican if you're pro-choice in your state? But I digress. Maybe not. Maybe I'm not digressing. Maybe I am. But just like liberals who don't know what it means to be a woman anymore, conservatives don't know what it means to be conservative anymore, which is why conservatives will build a thriving city only to turn it over to the liberals in 50 years, something like that. Think of Dallas, Texas, San Diego, Boise, Idaho. It's run by a liberal mayor right now. Why do you never see liberals building thriving cities and then conservatives taking over that city? Why it only goes one way? I think part of the answer here is that Democrats believe in their ideology. They believe in in what they're doing, while conservatives will compromise on their convictions, thinking they are being wise as serpent, innocent as a dove, to accomplish whatever they're calling the greater good. Whatever that means. But to be a conservative these days means that you loosely hold on to what it means to be conservative. You tip the hat to, Judeo-Christian values, or to traditional marriage, or to the nuclear family. Also, you can kind of get elected in the primaries as a conservative Republican. But once in office, you play it safe, don't get into any controversies, God forbid. Only push legislation that deals with the symptoms and not the root of problems. Like CRT. That's a symptom. The problem? Public schools. Public schools are critical theory. CRT just adds the race to it. Groomers in the classroom. We're groomers. We're passing legislation for groomers. That's the symptom. Keystone pipelines, gun laws, all this stuff. And then we're surprised that Democrats get their gay agenda pushed through, their trans bathrooms pushed through, their Obamacare pushed through. The Democrats know how to get their winning agenda implemented, and yet conservatives think we are winning when we pass an anti-CRT bill. Conservatives think they're winning when, we finally get respectable, can we call it that? Quote unquote, gay Reuben in our camp. We think we're winning. Conservatives think we're winning when we lower sales tax while increasing your property taxes. That happens. It happened in Idaho. Conservatives think we're winning when we get a 15-week ban on abortion. I'm for incrementalism, but we think we're winning. We think that's the end goal. Conservatives think we're winning when Ron DeSantis passes anti-grooming legislation for our classrooms, for our public schools. But here's the deal. Conservatives have unified around what we are against, not what we are for. We are against CRT. We are against grooming. We are against, Biden and the socialistic policies of the Democrat Party. But what are we for? Besides some sort of vague notion of family, faith, and freedom. As we work to rebuild a right and proper view of what it means to be conservative or truly conservative, what it means to be a Christian engaged in politics, we have to cast a vision of what we are for. My guest, Eric Kahn, he's an outlaw theologian, a Western native, bearded gospel man, writer, outdoorsman, and his pronouns are your mom. And you can follow
That's right.
Eric. You can follow Eric Kahn at erickahn.com. Eric, thanks for coming to the show, man. Appreciate you.
Absolutely, Gabe. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So what does it mean we have this current notion of what it means to be conservative. So what does that kind of current notion mean? And what should it mean to be truly conservative?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, and part of this is you talk about being a conservative. You have to ask yourself the question, what are we actually conserving? I think in the old, 50 years ago, pre-World War II, we would have pretty much all agreed that was Western Christendom. I think today what's happened, the conservative party's been hijacked by a lot of what we call neocons. That goes back to the 80s. Bill Kristol, people like that. You see it all the time. David French. Essentially, and you can see it even in the Daily Wire. I mean, you got people who are saying, look, we want to drink liberal tears. But it goes back to the G.K. Chesterton quote, the true soldier fights not because he hates what is in front of him, but because he loves what's behind him. So we've got to ask ourselves, what do we love that's behind us? I think today you see a lot of the conservatism. I'm not fighting for Dave Rubin and sodomy and stealing children, right? But that's where the money for conservatism has gone. I think a lot of the big voices, when that was going on, still going on today. Jordan Peterson getting roped into the same thing with Dave Rubin. People aren't really wanting to say much to that because they recognize that there's a moral problem with the conservative party. And I think R.L. Dabney was right here. This is a long time ago, but he said conservatism has become merely the shadow that follows radicalism on the road to perdition. That's really what conservatism is today. Now, I think if you look back, even somebody like Russell Kirk, they would have defined conservatism, things like free markets, fiscal responsibility. I mean, you look at the Republican Party today, they're the ones passing these, outrageous spending bills. And you brought it up about Florida. The fact that we even have to have a discussion in the legislature about, can we have transgender teaching for our kindergartners?
Grooming.
We've already failed at that point.
It's incredible. Yeah. So, George Bush, I actually kind of hang the hat on maybe some of a lot of the problems of modern conservatism actually on the Bush era. George Bush, he coined the term compassionate conservatism, which largely turned into a Christless conservatism, really, and turned the and then I think returned the Republican Party into a bunch of sissies, really. and then Trump came along and kind of broke everything, right? I want to argue for a faithful conservatism, a Christ-filled conservatism, but how do we get the Republican Party to come along and get behind this? What we're saying is a new vision, but it's not a new vision. It's just the old Edmund Burke philosophy.
Yeah, I think a big part of that is showing them the futility of what they're trying to defend, or the fact that they're not really defending anything at all. You brought that up with George W. Bush. I remember that era as being one where we were still in the conservative Republican camps. You were still talking about things like, being morally and socially conservative. You notice that language has gone completely out the window. Yeah. And I think what we want to do is we want to say, listen, you want to push back against the LGBT thing, but you can't do that while, 1 degree away is Dave Rubin, whom you're celebrating.
That's right.
And you think about things, people like Dennis Prager, a lot of solid conservative advice, but then he's also encouraging young men to fornicate to try it out. So I think we've got to get back to the moral foundations, which can only be provided from Christendom. Yeah. And I think just press people on where else are you going to find that foundation for society. I think this is actually an Enlightenment error that we keep making, where we think that we can keep the house but destroy the foundation. And slowly over time, you're just going to erode all of society. So I think that's one place to start, is to show them, look, a house without a foundation is not going to stand.
That's right. You know, conservatives, as I mentioned earlier, conservatives have kind of rallied around what they've been against, you know, CRT, critical race, grooming, whatever. And you make a good point about, you know, conservatives need to conserve and because you love what's behind you. But we also should, you know, kind of be defining what we're for in all this. What should conservatives be for in all this?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think fundamentally, I would define it sort of like Van Til did, that I'm really pushing for reformed Christendom. I wouldn't make any apologies about that. I think you need more strong voices of people doing that. Sort of the mentality has been, hey, let's go out into the public sphere and let's kind of approach it from a middler type mindset. Let's try and find middle ground with people. And over the decades, we've seen that just hasn't worked. Yeah, so my philosophy with it has been totally different. Let's be Reformed Christians. Let's be post-mill. Listen, the left is post-mill. You mentioned that before. That is why the left is winning, because they want your kids, and they believe that they're going to win the culture war. So we really have to fundamentally ask ourselves, you know, again, what kind of culture do we want? What is culture? First of all, culture comes from cultus, which is the worship of the people. So if we want to have a great culture, we want to win a culture war, we've really got to go back to the foundations of Christian worship. And then I think, pressing that into every sphere of life. Christ is king. He rules over every sphere, including the people who are appointed to public office. I think as we continue to do that, it's going to include other things too. That's the core and the foundation, but it's also going to include things like free markets. What we need to be pressing people now is, if you love your neighbor, you're going to push for free markets.
That's
because I guarantee you that what's happening with inflation is not love to neighbor.
No.
When your poor neighbors can't afford gas, it's not love to neighbor. And then I think as well, just showing the only way to bring about human flourishing is through the law of God. You really have two choices in the public sphere. Do you want a pagan with wicked, unjust laws and those who suppress the truth and their wickedness? Do you want them ruling you, or do you want wise Christians? Those are the two options in the public sphere. So we continue to press for those things. And again, show people that that's where you're going to find human flourishing.
You know, November is looking to be a bloodbath for Democrats. But what makes me nervous is all these Republicans, let's say, get in, and then we don't repent. We don't understand just how bad of a condition we're in, because we think, oh, we just took the House and Senate back. How do we win and repent at the same time here?
Yeah, I think a huge part of the question, you know, you can look at a lot of red states right now. I think of two particularly. You know, it's red through and through. Governor's office, you know, both houses, with Tennessee and Alabama. And you go to those states and you say, how come they don't look that very much different than every other state? They have Republican majorities. So I think the problem here is, you can have a Republican majority, but if the party is rotted through to the core, you know, we've got to think about a few things. Number one, locally, we've got to hold our elected officials accountable, no matter what side they're on. But I think there's been a mistake to think that you could move to a state, it would just, you vote Republican, and then the Republicans are going to do the right thing. The problem is, in those states, you still have people who are, you know, corrupt. You still have people who are playing to special interests, people who are taking money from certain people to push certain legislation. So you'd actually, I think, be surprised as you look at those, you know, so-called red states, that they're not actually representing what, especially as Christians, we believe. And this is one of the things, I know Aaron Renn has talked a lot about this. He had a podcast series, Why the Republican Party Hates Your Guts. But it comes down to this issue. The Republican Party has not kept its promises. Right? They claim to be fiscally responsible. They're not. They're just as bad as anybody else. The Republican states are taking buku dollars from the federal government. So I think, again, it's going to go down to, we definitely want to have Republicans in office, but we've got to hold those people accountable. And, you know, answers to that question, we need things like this. We need Christian media. We need people who are going to ask the tough questions. And we need to support local legislators that are courageous and competent and uphold God's righteous standard.
Eric, stay with us. I want to bring Joseph Backholm also into this. Joseph Backholm is a Water Break contributor. Joseph, good to see you again. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, Gabe. Good to see you.
Hey, man, you've been kind of listening in to me and Eric a little bit, and I think there's kind of a practical problem here. You know, we're talking kind of for a Christ-filled, Christ-centered kind of Republican conservative politics here, but I think there's a real practical problem about, you know, trying to get let's say an explicitly Christian conservative elected in office. You know, they feel the tension of wanting to walk that fine line between, you know, their hardcore Christian conservative values and what's going around us in our politics. You know, whether you're in Idaho, you're going to feel one kind of attention, or we're in the state of Washington, you're going to feel a different kind of attention. But that tension, how does a conservative Christian get elected in our current climate without losing their convictions?
I think where you live is really relevant. And, you know, people say that politics is the art of compromise, and that's true. And sometimes that's bad. And I don't know that it's always bad. And I don't think there's a really clear answer for Christians to that specific question, because the context in which you're trying to run for office and stay in office is going to be different for every person. And certainly being in California or Washington State is different than being in Oklahoma or Missouri or something like that. You know, and I really think the Holy Spirit, you know, Scripture does not speak a lot to how to be a politician and how to be in office, but we do have the Holy Spirit, and there are some things that are compromises that some people feel like they can't make, and there are some compromises that other people feel like they can make, and the facts are so specific in a given situation. And I've seen, you know, in my work in politics, where somebody voted for something that was actually bad, because by virtue of voting for it, it was significantly less bad than it would have been otherwise. And when you read the headline, this is a bad bill, and they would say, yes, this is a bad bill, but I voted for it because it was going to be significantly worse if I hadn't had this compromise and agreed to vote for it. Right. Does that mean they've done the wrong thing? I don't know. I think I can understand the position of somebody who would say, you voted for something bad, therefore it's bad. But I also understand the person who's standing in the middle of the battle and says, well, it's not as bad. Fewer people are going to be hurt than otherwise would have been hurt. Right. And that was the bargain that I bargained for. And so it is not, it's not simple. It's not clean. But you know, on one level, we have to have a conviction where we're not going to give an inch to the other side, but we also have to have grace for the reality that in life, and much less in politics, perfect choices rarely present themselves.
Mm-hmm. Do you agree with Aaron Renn? Eric brought up Aaron Renn earlier about why the Republican Party hates you. Do you agree with that kind of sentiment?
Well, I agree that it's true that the political parties are soulless entities. And there are certainly people within the parties who do not hate you. There are people who are within the parties who would be part of this conversation that we're having right now and be very comfortable doing so. Mm-hmm. But the parties themselves, they just want as many people in their uniform as possible. And all of the evidence suggests to me that they're willing to flip positions on a dime if they need to, if they think that's the strategic way to get more people in their uniform than are in the other team's uniform. So the parties are, but of course within the party, there's good people and there's not good people. And that, like all the rest of this, is complex. And really what we have to do is take each person and each situation and try to extend grace. But also, I mean, we've got to have a lot more courage. And I think the problems that we're dealing with are because people get in those positions and they're really fighting for themselves rather than for truth, or rather for the kingdom, or rather for other people. Once that, to me, is the real temptation, you get rid of that and people are really fighting for something other than themselves, their own power, their own re-election. Once that's not the primary motivation of what's happening in politics, I think you get some good things done as long as you're in a party, you're on a ship that is not actively trying to do evil. Now, I think there's a difference between the Republican and the Democratic Party, because I don't think there's much in the Democratic Party that Satan doesn't support in terms of their agenda or what they're trying to accomplish. It took me a long time to get there, right? That doesn't mean I think the Republicans are all the good guys, but at least they're not actively trying to do evil all the time. So that to me makes that, at least it's a better tool to work with, as imperfect as it is.
So you kind of referenced the big tent desire for both parties. They want to get as many people in to vote for them to keep them in power. Big tent. But it seems to me there's also a problem with the Big Tent. Of course, I want to lead, and I want everybody to, if I'm president of the United States, I want to do my best to lead, and I want everybody to kind of hopefully follow my leadership. And whether you're a Democrat and you're gay and you vote for me, or that's fine, whatever. I'm leading with my agenda, with my convictions. Yeah. If you're behind me, that's great. But we're in a moment like in the Republican Party. I mentioned 4 governors that are refusing to end abortion in their state, and actually just explicitly said, "No, we think I think one of the governors even had a problem with this SCOTUS overturning the ruling." How do we clean up? How do we be a big tent at the same time trying to clean up governors who won't or refuse to end abortion in their state?
Yeah, that's a great question. It really depends on what is possible for you, because you want to hold the line on these folks, and I'll answer this in maybe a roundabout way, because when we look at what just happened when we overturned Roe versus Wade, who were the people that brought us the overturn of Roe versus Wade? Basically, Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell.
Oh, right? Excuse me. I'm sorry. Originally in 1973, 7 Republicans gave us Roe v. Wade on SCOTUS.
Right.
Yeah. Sorry. I missed. Keep going.
Okay. And the people who helped us overturn Roe versus Wade that led to that are Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell, right? None of us would look at them and say, those are that's the example that we want. The reality is that this system and this process, because we're dealing, as convicted as we are, our worldview and even our understanding of conservatism is not the majority of the public in the United States, or probably any state in the union, frankly. Right. And so there's always this function of we're going to have to figure out how to work with people who don't see eye to eye with us on everything. I'm actually a believer the fact that you can't make the best the enemy of the good, because there aren't perfect choices. Does that mean I want people to compromise? No. But on one sense, and there's the sovereignty part of this, I think matters to me in public policy. I'm going to try to be obedient. I'm going to encourage you to be obedient. I'm going to try to encourage none of us to compromise and do exactly what God wants us to do. But God ultimately has to take care of the results. And what he's going to do is he's going to use a bunch of people that were like, don't be like them, but thank God used them, right? And that stuff happens all the time in policy. And that gives me hope in some ways that God can use me as well, right? Because none of us are perfect. We're all just in our process. And so I think, the conviction that God gives us not to compromise, to be strong, to hold people accountable, that's what God has called us to do. But ultimately, it's not our strategy. It's not our conviction. And I think the fact that he goes and grabs a Mitch McConnell and he goes and grabs a Donald Trump to accomplish his purpose, I think makes sure that we don't feel like, hey, we did it right. We executed the right strategy, because ultimately he's supposed to get the glory, and we're just supposed to be faithful.
Eric, I want to kick that same kind of question over to you. How does the Republican Party, I guess, remain big tent or get the votes to win, and at the same time clean house with Republicans who refuse to end abortion or are basically acting like major Democrats would?
Yeah, I think a lot of the answer to that question is really local, getting involved. There are actually a lot of groups that you can get politically active with. Even things about being involved in the Republican Party in the nomination process is really not as hard as people think. I think the problem is you watch Fox News or you listen to talk radio and you get all fired up, and then you don't do anything. And what you got to realize, there's a lot of people who want to make money off of your outrage. And what you need to do is turn that into action. So really, again, holding people accountable locally. One of the encouraging things that I found as we've done that in a number of states is that you actually find people who are on your team and who you can partner with, and they need to know that you support them and that you can rally other people to them. So I think just being a part of that process can actually be really huge. And then we start local, we build, and then some of those guys who are empowered can do a lot of great work. One of those that I think of is Thomas Massie. When people think the Republican Party's out to get you, a lot of them are. But to Joseph's point earlier, there's a lot of good men fighting too, and we do need to support them.
Right. So, Joseph, there's this opinion piece in the Political Insider talking about how it's going to be more difficult for conservative businesses to kind of interact in this woke economy, or woke capitalism, what he referred to as woke capitalism. But then he also kind of brought in the additional factor beyond kind of this woke corporate capitalism about kind of how SCOTUS, the Roe v. Wade decision, is going to add, fuel to that fire. Now, the SCOTUS decision hasn't really shaken out at the state level yet. It's, Idaho's abortion ban, I think, kicks in July 30th or something like that. And so, each state kind of has some trigger mechanisms in place that are kicking in slowly. But how would you kind of counsel businesses, kind of particularly explicitly Christian conservative businesses, to be thinking about this woke capitalism culture and how to be a business when you're more happy to do business with the liberals and the woke capitalists than they are happy to be doing business with you?
Yeah. Well, I think the dynamics of kind of the capitalist culture that's being created are not dissimilar from what we're dealing with in what we were just talking about with politicians, and because everything is becoming tribal, right? And what you're seeing in the marketplace is there are a bunch of companies that are funding stuff that's terrible, that they're explicitly saying, we don't want your business if you don't agree with us on the sexual revolution, things like that. And so each of us has to think about, well, does that mean I don't want to go to this place because I don't want to support them? If that's a bright line in the sand, doing business becomes pretty hard. Where can I get a burger? Where I can't get a burger? Where can't I get a burger? Because that has infiltrated a lot of corporate America, even places that haven't done it super publicly, like, a Disney. But I think for Christian businesses, I think it creates a tremendous opportunity. I think we have to be thinking in terms of creating our own economy. So all of the services, because we hear about cancel culture, and for those of us who've run nonprofits and work in that space, you're getting kicked off your email providers, you're kicking all the social media, getting booted from. Everybody knows about those things. But increasingly, the concern is going to be about whether you can have a bank account and whether you can have commerce. Visa has recently, they participated, they became political in the very first way over the boycotts of Ukraine. And everybody supports that because we all think, the boycotts over Russia because of their invasion of Ukraine.
That's right.
And everybody is like, yeah, we all hate Russia right now, right? But think about what Visa, if they decided to get additionally woke and say, yeah, we want to get Putin, but we want to get all those other terrible white supremacists as well. And of course, everybody's a white supremacist in their minds, right? They just cut off the ability of people to do commerce. And so that's definitely how the left thinks. That's definitely where many of them would already like to go. Of course, that's not mainstream when it comes to, like, you can't have a credit card anymore, but we have to think in those terms because that's how they're thinking. But I think it creates, in a free market, a bunch of opportunity for companies that want to rise to the occasion and say, hey, I'm going to provide a service and I'm going to promise you that nobody's ever going to kick you off of this service because of what you think, right? I think that's a great opportunity.
Yeah. Eric, what about you? I mean, you got a number of ventures that you're working on and stuff. How are you thinking about kind of this business, political, cultural climate? And again, I'm happy to sell a burger, or I'm happy to provide, services to a liberal, even a gay liberal, or whatever, whatever you think of the worst liberal you have in front of your face, but they're not happy to do business with us. They're more than happy to cancel us. I mean, Joseph Backholm mentioned bank accounts. Well, Mike Lindell, the My Pillow guy, he got kicked out of Minnesota Bank and Trust. He had like 8 or 9 accounts with them, and they finally kicked him off. And the reason is they said, quote unquote, he is a reputation hazard. That's why they kicked him off, which is insane. But there you are. They're not happy to do business with me when I'm happy to have my money at their bank.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And Mike Lindell, of course, kicked out of Walmart as well. His product out of Walmart, which is a huge deal. That represents a lot of money as well. Yeah, listen, I agree with Joseph. I think Andrew Torba's been a pretty good example of pushing for this, but you're going to need parallel economy. You're going to need to find ways to break free from corporate America. And I think there's a myriad ways of doing that. I think one of them is localism. I think that if you can have a network of people supporting each other, particularly in trades right now, I think they're less susceptible to that. Obviously, when you're talking about things like Visa and bank accounts, that's going to affect virtually everybody. But you're starting to see 2 alternatives that are springing up, Goldback being one of them, Andrew Torba looking into alternative funding. It's interesting in the last 2 years, though. Overall, what I would say to people, for an entrepreneur and a businessman in the last 2 years, I've actually found that it's been quite ripe for opportunity.
Yeah.
For anybody who has a skill, all right, Proverbs are right. If you have a skill and you're good at what you do, you'll stand before kings. And so just keep pressing into those things. And really what I found is, look, if you're competent and you know how to do things and build things, as Elon Musk would say, you know how to make things and give services to people, you're in a good position.
Yeah.
So I think that's the overall bent. And then I think also just recognizing, look, that's going to be a long slogging fight. I've seen a lot of guys try to start a business or get, some enterprise up and running in a year. That's pretty tough to do. We've got to have guys who are playing it for the long game. And maybe some of the incentive to do that are books like the Google Archipelago, which came out early 2020, sort of a harbinger for things to come. The way I see it, I think the book is right. Marxism is not coming down the pipeline in hardcore statism. It's being enforced by corporations. And so that's what we've got to be particularly careful about.
Eric and Joseph, thank you very much. Eric, where I pointed people to your website, erickcahn.com. Is that good?
Absolutely.
And Joseph, I forget your Twitter handle. You should put it on when you sign in. Put on your Twitter handle.
I would at Joseph Backholm. It's not that complicated. If you can read my name, you can find my Twitter handle. I also write World Opinions and frc.org/worldview, where I am frequently writing.
All right. Thanks for joining us, Eric and Joseph. Appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
It's been a pretty heavy show. So it's time to bring in news that you can trust.
Time to bring in a lightweight.
Time to bring in. We go from heavyweight to lightweight.
Lightweight.
Yes. John Brannon, comedian John Brannon. How are you doing, man?
I'm fantastic, Gabe. Thanks for asking.
Yeah. So news that John Brannon can trust, and the reason why this segment is so important to Water Break and to the viewers is that there is not really much news that you can trust out there.
No.
And so what we need to do with a comedian, by the way,
right?
We need to straighten that course. We need to give you news that you can trust.
We need to open the floodgate of trustworthy news.
But the only trustworthy people these days are comedians.
Correct. Those are the only people we can trust now.
That's it. So news that John Brannon can trust. John, did you know that I'm trying to play my music a little bit, but I can't. The median length of business experience among the top 68 officials in the Biden administration is 0 years.
Okay, say that again.
Yeah, hang on. Let me turn it down just a little bit.
The median.
Yeah, the median. Okay. The median length of business experience among the top 68 officials in the Biden administration. So business experience, you work at a business.
Right.
Low threshold here is 0 years.
0 is the median. Okay. Well, I've got a couple of observations I would like to make. First of all, I'm surprised it's not negative.
How could it be negative?
Well, the Biden administration has proven itself capable of doing all sorts of incredibly incompetent things. And so I think, possible. Gabe, to be fair, what we need to do is value the experience that the Biden administration does bring to America. I think we're undervaluing that experience. There are, if I'm not mistaken, there are 372 years of collective experience in this administration fighting against family values. That's not something to overlook. There are 691 years of experience stealing resources from hardworking people and giving it to derelicts.
Yeah.
And so, derelicts are people too. There are 800 years destroying babies before they're born, which keeps them from growing up and becoming Democrats themselves.
Yeah, that's true.
And then there are over 1,000 years of experience just ushering in depravity and wickedness. And this is a pluralistic society, and so depravity and wickedness is not something that everybody is opposed to.
It's a commodity. It's a commodity. So President Joe Biden never worked in business. He's been a politician his whole life. I take it back. He's helped his son in business. Ooh. Mm-hmm. Vice President Harris, she's been a politician her whole life. The Treasury Secretary, this is a tough one for me. Janet Yellen, she has 0 years in business.
Mm-hmm.
Treasury Secretary of Labor, Marty Walsh, 0 years in business. Mm-hmm. All these kind of economic, political positions. U.S. Trade Representative Catherine Tai, 0 years in business.
Right.
Those are. It seems like you should be required to work in business before being a politician.
Why do you need to have years of experience in business in order to know how to destroy business? I mean, that doesn't. You don't need experience. You don't need experience in business to demolish the economy.
That's fair. To increase inflation.
Yeah.
To ship oil reserves to China. You don't need experience in business for that.
No, you don't. You only need experience if you're going to somehow benefit business. And
news that John Brandon can trust. California just instituted a law allowing residents to sue firearm manufacturers if the guns they sell are used in crimes.
Residents can sue gun manufacturers if guns that they manufacture are used in a crime.
Yeah.
I'm going to say good. I'm good. I'm actually fully supportive.
You're surprising me, John.
I'm fully supportive of this legislation, and I will tell you why. Okay. Because I am sick of California being part of the United States. And the more they pass laws, the quicker this empire is going to collapse. And so I say, good for them. Step on the gas. I don't think this actually goes far enough, Gabe. What about the manufacturers of cars that are used in crimes, like as getaway cars? What about the manufacturers of ski masks and disguises that are used in crime? What about the manufacturers of their footwear when they mug people?
Yeah.
I think the residents should be allowed to sue the manufacturer of whatever gum the criminals are chewing. I think they should sue soft drink manufacturers. You know what? I think they should be able to sue anybody who makes anything.
Preach it.
In California.
Preach it. Get out and get out of California.
And let's say they can sue anybody who makes anything. Get it done today, and let's hope that this is finally enough to end California's unholy empire.
Here's what Governor Newsom said. He said, gun manufacturers, he tweeted this out. Gun manufacturers and distributors have been shielded from the mass destruction they cause far too long. Today, CA changes that. I just signed a bill that will allow victims of gun violence to sue the makers of these deadly weapons and hold them accountable. So if a cop shoots someone, can that person sue the gun manufacturer of the cop also?
Probably not if they're dead. But
no, they're family.
Oh, they're family.
Yeah,
the residents. I wouldn't be surprised, and I would support that too. I mean, literally anybody who's upset with any manufacturer for any reason in California should be able to sue that manufacturer, and we'll see how long they keep going out there.
Yeah.
The problem is they've been too lenient. They've been too lenient on the producers in California. They've allowed people to continue to profit and to make money producing things in California. That needs to end. They need to go to war with everybody who is contributing to the economy in California as soon as possible.
I wonder if that law only applies to gun manufacturers inside of California. Right? You know what I'm saying?
It would have to, I would think.
Yeah.
Right?
Because you can't make a law for a gun manufacturer in Massachusetts and that law apply, and that manufacturer now have to, or maybe if a gun manufacturer selling guns inside the state of California, I'm not sure how that would shake out. I don't know
how it would work either. Yeah. The important thing is that they're trying. The important thing is that they are trying to completely undermine the solidity of their economy, and I salute them in that. It's like I am 100% on board with them destroying themselves.
Well, and that's a fair point. And it seems to me that if it is a law that applies to only manufacturers in California, well, then just all the gun manufacturers are just going to leave California.
Right. And really, what good is it? If you can't sue a manufacturer outside of California, then this is just empty showboating. This is just virtue signaling. Is all they're doing. Because what good does it do? If all the guns are manufactured outside of the state of California.
That's right.
All of those residents who are like, yeah, we're finally going to get something done. It's like, no, this accomplishes nothing. You morons. Maybe they should stay in California. Those people, if you think that this law is going to be somehow useful or it's going to change things, then you should definitely stay in California and fight for this.
News that John Branyan, that only John Branyan can trust. That's it. It's only John Branyan.
Only I can trust it. I thought everybody could trust it.
You can only trust him. I'm having a problem here trying to turn this. John, thanks for joining us, man. Appreciate it, man. So, my prayer, I think one of the goals I'm trying to do here at Water Break with the interviews that I get on and with my team, my prayer and goals for Water Break is that you are encouraged to find ways to engage with your gifts and abilities, to lead with your faith and not hide it under a bushel, and to really take your faith, take what God has given you, your gifts and your abilities, and to engage the lordship of Christ, particularly in the public square. And I pray God uses it to change your city, your state, your country, our country. So may the Lord bless you in that. And may the Lord encourage you to do more. This is the Water Boy with Water Break. Until next Sunday, go fight, laugh, and feast.
Home. It's where you build your legacy, where traditions are started, seeds are planted, meals are shared, and stories are told. We are Chris and Natalie Carpenter, owners of Story Real Estate, and our team of top agents helps people find homes in Moscow, Idaho, and around the country.
Have you thought about a move? Contact us to get connected with a top agent who shares your values and puts your family first. Or reach out to us about our Moscow relocation guide.
Wherever you're looking to go, we can help you find home. Call us at Story Real Estate or visit us at storyrealestate.com and start building your legacy.